Okay, welcome to the listening, Janet-Lee Ropas. So, you're in California, are you? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, in Northern California.
So, did you get a lot of the wildfires? Were you affected by all of that? Because that's something that was going on in California, obviously
Yes.
further down.
Yes. Um, we were thankfully safe, but we were in within about an hour of some places that had massive devastation. And so we we didn't have to evacuate, thankfully, but we got all the smoke. So last year was probably one of the worst years, and it was about aside from what's been going on with the pandemic, but like you couldn't go outside because the smoke was so heavy. And we had a couple of days where the whole sky was just like this orange color from smoke. So it's been intense, and
Okay.
it started like normally fire seasons like starts in October, November, and it started in August last year. So we're kind of seeing what happens, and quite honestly thinking about if it's time to move and relocate because it's just getting worse and worse every year, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems like California's been hit hard in lots of ways. I sort of get the impression that yeah, that people are, well, certainly very publicly, some, more well-known people are leaving, aren't they, with the pandemic and everything, but it does
Yeah.
seem like it's been a hard time. Have you noticed the sort of general change in mood of the people that live there and in yourself? Has it kind of,
Well, right now it's hard because I feel like I'm not out, and the world is not functioning in the way it is to read in that way. But I do think there's a heightened like PTSD for a lot of people, especially people who are from here. So I'm from New York originally,
oh,
and I've been out here for this is my seventh year, 7 years. So although it does feel like home, I have a different attachment, obviously, than people who are born and raised here. So I do feel like that anxiety there and grief. There's a lot of sadness of like this is their home, this is our home,
yeah,
and it's being devastated. Yeah.
yeah. So you're from the East Coast then. Interesting. So
Yeah.
how did you find California when you first got there then? Quite different, I guess, compared to home.
Yes. That's why I moved here.
Oh, really?
Because it was so different. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what was how long were you in New York for? Your whole sort of childhood?
So I was born in Staten Island, which is a suburb just outside of New York City. It's like within a 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
And I lived there until I was 10. And then I moved to New Jersey, and I lived there for well, I guess 7 years because I left when I went right before I turned 18. So almost 8 years when I went to college. And then I sort of bounced around between Connecticut back to Staten Island for a little bit. And then I lived in New York City, Manhattan proper for 7 years. And, um, and then I did a lot of traveling for about 2 years. And then I moved here. So I've kind of always had a transient energy in my homes. But I visited San Francisco in 2004. It was my first solo trip I ever took. And I just fell in love with the city immediately. And then I would come back every year for 9 years and just come visit. Didn't have any friends here, didn't have any family, and I just loved the city. And so then after I was shifting and moving out of New York and just feeling like I needed a break from that energy, and also just disheartened by just how grueling and intense that way of life can be, that the rat race. Um, and so then I was like, well, I already went and traveled, and I left my job. Like I uprooted my life a lot. So I was like, might as well just take the leap now, move cross country. If I don't like it, I can leave. But obviously I've been here for 7 years. So it's, it's
Yeah.
been a good move. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
love,
I get the impression that New York's probably, or used to be, I mean, everything's changed so much recently,
yeah,
hasn't it? It's hard to kind of gauge. All our sort of references of how things are have just been totally altered. But I do get the feeling. I've been to New York years ago, that it is one of the most intense places maybe on earth to live in terms of working and just the energy, and how in your face it is. Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Your nervous system is just like jacked up
yeah, all the time.
24/7. And in my former life, I worked on a Wall Street trading floor. So not only was I in Manhattan, I was in like the belly of the beast of Manhattan. So it was just like all the time. So by the time I was 28, I was already burnt out. Like,
Wow. So
not
that's like
normal.
you started out working on Wall Street then, basically.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
brought? Tell me about that. What led you to Wall Street? What what was it about that that initially pulled you in? What was it that fascinated you about that, or made you want to have a career in Wall Street?
Nothing. I never wanted a career on Wall Street.
There must have been something that kind of
Yeah.
led you there. There must have been something, even if you've kind of parted company with it now. Was there not something originally that led you?
Um, so, I mean, the short answer is I sold out for false security, for money and health benefits and all that.
Right.
But I started out like my college degree is in psychology, um, and so I started out wanting to do really good in the world and work with particularly women, but I didn't like ultimately the lot of work that I do now is very much rooted in spirituality. I didn't have the language or the learning and all the teachings that I have acquired at that time, at that young age, because no one in my life, wanted to do the things that I wanted to do. So I thought psychology was the route. And I was very much on the path. I was going to go for my PhD, open up my own practice. Like that was the vision. And then it was the summer before my sophomore year of college. My aunt called me up and she's like, hey, she was in the human resources department of a very, very big investment banking firm. And she's like, I'm a liaison with someone who works on the trading floor. She needs an assistant for the summer. Do you want to come do this? Never once ever had a conversation with her about working on Wall Street. Only had a vague idea of what she even did for work, and
Right.
and so it was just like out of left field. And I'm like, oh no, 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 I'm going back to my retail job. Like I'm home for the summer. I'm gonna help my mom babysit my brothers. There's a big age gap between me and my siblings. So it was like I was set. And she's like, well, you can make, and I don't even remember now, but it was like thousands and thousands of dollars. It was like I wouldn't have made that in retail, and I didn't come from a lot of money, so it felt like, okay, this is an opportunity I need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
take, and I was just thinking like I'll save it, and then still on the path of like this is just to give me some savings and some cushion while I go for my degree, and then heartbreak happened. And right as I finished college, my relationship with my first love, and I was just like devastated. So I was like, I'm going to take a break because I couldn't focus on studying. And then I said, I'll temp for a little while, temp full time. At this point, I had already graduated college. And that turned into a year of temping, turned into, hey, can you just sign me on full time? I'm still here. I might as well get the benefits and the 401k and, all that stuff. And then that turned into another 8 years. So I didn't remove myself. And then I got caught up uh, there.
Wow. And the whole lifestyle, I guess, you get sort of sucked into that, and did you have like, because college debts can be massive in the States, can't they? Like fees for college. Did you have all that to deal with as well?
No,
Oh,
no, thankfully.
okay.
Because of my parents were divorced and they didn't make a lot of income, I got a lot of financial aid. Plus, I
Okay.
got a lot of scholarships. I always did really well in school. So that combined, and my first 2 years was when I had the most debt. But then I saw how much the debt was piling up because I went to a private school and I was dorming. I actually switched schools and moved in with my grandparents. So that's when I was in Connecticut for 2 years and then switched to a school on Staten Island. And I lived with my grandparents, so I didn't pay for dorming. And then because I was working, um, since I was working the summers at this bank, I was able to switch my schedule around and be able to work there 2 days full time during the week while going to school. And so I paid for my last 2 years of college like direct. I don't like I
Yeah.
didn't have to take any loans out for so the little bit that wasn't covered by financial aid and by scholarships. And then it also was a less expensive school than the first one I went to. So I was very blessed in that way. And so I think the debt from the first 2 years, but within 2 years of graduating um, college, I paid that off.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, well, just that sort of, when there is some money, it's hard to sort of pass that up, especially when you're young and you've got all those desires and the things you want and the life you want. It's kind of hard, I guess. But so you got so deep into that, and then what happened? What broke the spell? What made that shift happen then? Because it was quite a big one, right?
Yeah. I think, you know, although I sort of got sucked in, I also always knew it was temporary. Like there was always this little like voice inside, like this is not your lifetime path. Like you cannot stay here forever. There was always that, but I didn't know what to do. And then, time can go fast when you're not actually making a plan for things. But my wake up call actually was when I was 28. And if you're into astrology, I don't know much about it, but apparently that's your Saturn return. I found out about this after I went through it, and it's a time where it's like supposed to be like a huge catalyst. I don't know exactly why, but it's normally like you can get this like massive nudge, and it could totally, flip over your life. I didn't know that, and if that's part of it or not, but whatever the case was, for me, I was reflecting on that in 2 years I was going to be 30 and that my life looked nothing at all how I dreamed or what I truly wanted. It was affording certain things. Like I always loved to travel and had a dream of traveling around the world. I was able to do that. I was always wanted to live in New York City. I was able to financially afford it, from the blessings of the job. So I sort of made excuses or, thought like there was, I thought it was funneling other dreams. And then I thought my financial security was allowed me to also help my family a little bit. So I channeled that into like, oh, that's how I'm doing good in the world. Like that's how I'm like all that drive for service that I wanted. Like that's how. But actually, I was just enabling things and causing harm in some ways. Um, so I'm like having this meltdown as I'm 28 and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be 30 in 2 years. Like, what is going on? I'm not in the job I'm on. I'm not in a relationship. Like, what is happening? I'm not serving in the way that I want. And so I went away for like 3 days. It was a long weekend. It was in January, and I went away. I had a really good friend who was able to travel on the spur of the moment, and we went. And then when I got back to New York, it was the first time. Well, actually, I extended my trip, so I'm not one to lie, but I did call my job and I told them that my flight got canceled or something was amiss so that I could stay one more day. But it was a mental health moment. Like I was in like
Yeah, yeah.
crisis. But when I got back to New York, it was the first time ever. I just wasn't excited to be there. Like I would travel and be so excited to come home to New York, and I didn't feel that way. And I was walking to work, and it was like the dead of winter, and it was like cement on my feet. Like I could barely move. And I know this doesn't sound dramatic. It sounds like out of a movie, but it's what happened. I heard this voice inside saying, if you don't leave now, you're going to die. Like if you do not leave now, you're going to die. And like something just shattered open inside of me. And I said, okay. I said, yes. I have no idea what you want me to do or the how, but yes, I will leave. And then that just set like in motion everything else that was about to unfold in my life. The universe is like, we got her. Like, she's finally, we've been nudging her all these years and she hasn't been answering. And now like I couldn't ignore that. And I think it meant not so much that I would physically die, although the stress of it probably would have killed me, given me a heart attack or something. But it was more of that I wasn't gonna be able to find my soul was gonna be too buried.
Sure.
Um, so
And
I,
what was the feeling when you knew, when you made the decision? How did you feel? Was there a massive sense of relief? What was that, do you remember the sort of feelings around that when you knew, when that moment when you knew you were going to do it, you were going to leave?
It felt, yes, it felt like relief. It felt like this permission that I wasn't giving myself. It almost felt like I was let out of prison, like somehow, like I was keeping myself caged in for so long. And it was just like, okay, I heard the call. I can do this now. And also a ton of fear. Like I was doing something that no one else in my life had done, because I wasn't just leaving to go into some other field or job. I decided to go travel around the world. So I traveled on and off for 2 years. Like I moved back home for a year. Like I created an exit plan. So I left by the time I turned right before my 30th birthday, but I had a deadline. So I stayed there longer, but I did it to set myself up financially to have that like I don't it, I hesitate with the word security, but it is the world that we live in. We do need money to thrive and survive in this
And
world.
it
So it was,
sounds like it's important for you as well. That's something that's in you, that sort of need for security, and that comes across as you talk, that
yeah,
that's obviously a part of who you are, and the fact that you want to take care of it, that you're not looking for it from someone else or somewhere else, that you're doing it for yourself. Uh,
yeah.
you know, yeah, it's interesting. And then, so what's that? Once you decided and you left work, what and you sort of then you wisely, I guess, went off on your travels just to find out, was that a kind of finding out who you actually were, or just seeing what where you would end up? Was there any plan with that, or you just wanted to go and see what happened?
I think more just I knew I needed to shift, and I knew that I needed to get out, like really get out of my current environment. But more than that, I always had the dream of traveling around the world. And I think I thought it was something that I couldn't do on my own, and that I would have to wait till I was with my partner. And at that time, I was undecided whether or not I wanted to have kids. I have consciously chosen not to go down that path this lifetime, but at the time, I was like still like not sure. And so it was like this thought of like, oh, I'll do that if I decide to have kids, do that after they're out of the house. And then I'm like, why, like what am I waiting for? And I also always had my grandfather used to always say, like, do all this traveling where you're when you're young. Like he was always so excited for me to do all that. So I also had that like in the back of my mind, and I said, I can do this by myself. I also was influenced and inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert's book Eat, Pray, Love. I had read that a few years before I decided to make the shift, and it was like reading a story of a woman who did go and travel around the world by herself. And I know lots and lots of women do that. It's not just someone famous, but I didn't have that in my world. So it gave me like a thread, an anchor. Um, so I think it was just to, okay, let me do something that is a dream of mine now, because none of this was my dream. And so that was the start of it. And very quickly, as I started traveling, I realized it was a returning home to myself ultimately, and getting to know who I am and what I love, and how I want to show up in the world, and pieces of me that I just either silenced or never gave the chance to breathe and come to life.
So you sort of went around the world picking up the pieces of yourself. Did you? Were there kind of experiences that sort of showed you another side of yourself, or reminded you or brought back pieces of yourself that had kind of been pushed aside or buried, or are there any particular experiences on your travels that kind of were fundamental in that kind of remembering who you are, who you really are?
More of it actually happened outside of traveling when I landed back in New York. But I will say that the traveling gave me was returning to some semblance of peace. Like I don't think I had any true peace when I was living that lifestyle in New York. And also I was ignoring myself. So like there was a lot of numbing out during that time. like why either I always overscheduled. I was tired all the time, and I thought that was just the thing that you did in your 20s, and that's what everyone does in New York City. Like you just you got to like experience it all. And there's some truth to like having that passion and experience in life, but not at to the point where you are causing harm. And then I would go out on the weekends. I would binge drink, and it was like I never drank in college, and I started drinking in my early 20s once I moved into New York City, and it was never really part of who I was. And but I just kind of got sucked in, and so there was a lot of ignoring and silencing, and just not willing to hear my inner self. And so the travel gave me a lot of space, especially since a lot of it I did by myself. And so I have this time alone and to begin to just enjoy my own company.
Mm.
And I think,
So it's more
and
of a
it,
shedding of just taking all the layers off,
yeah,
of stripping it all back and seeing
yeah,
what's left.
yeah, that's a great way to say it, actually. Yes. Yeah.
And maybe even, because when you were describing at the start, you probably had your New York head on when you were planning where you were going to go and this and that and do. Yeah, yeah. So
Exactly. You're the first person who has picked up on that to say that.
no, it's quite clear. I mean, I can really see how, and knowing my own experiences, how even when we're about to move into a new phase of life, because all we have is what we already know in terms of how we are, we often kind of just put that onto our new thing and use our old thinking, even though the change is actually saying, no, no, all of that needs to go. You need to actually become somebody new, which
Yeah.
means you'll think in a different way, you'll behave in a different way. So there is this transition, isn't there, where you've got to sort of unlearn all the things, the bad habits, or those
Yes.
kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Yes.
relate to that. But yeah, what's clear is that you have this tremendous courage all the way through,
Mm.
even like to go to Wall Street, even to leave Wall Street, to go traveling on your own. I mean, there is this common thread of courage which you clearly have.
Thank you.
Is that something you recognize in yourself, or is the heart something that's kind of quite powerful for you in terms of head, heart, body, and your sort of sense of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, yes, now I feel like my heart is the driving force. But when I was doing those things, I did have a lot of people just say to me, "You're so brave, you're so courageous." Especially, people were still getting majorly laid off at that time. I left in 2010, no, sorry, 2011. So
Okay.
it's
So yeah,
still a
not
few
long
years
after
off.
the crash. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and my job wasn't threatened. Like my boss actually was like, "What, can I do anything to get you to stay?" And I was like, "No." But so like even that, for mentally, it was like seemed crazy. Um, but I felt what I was doing was just I was doing what I needed to do to survive. So at the time, it didn't feel courageous or brave. It felt like I was trying to stay alive,
Sure.
you know.
No,
Um,
that's something I totally relate to because I had not the same story, but I left London. I was living in London for about 10 years, and I left to sort of come and live in the countryside here in Norfolk, and it was a survival thing for me too. It was like if I don't leave, I've had it. And when you've got no choice, it can look quite brave, especially if you're doing something quite unusual. But I think for me, it feels like it was like my soul was going to die if I didn't do something about it. So there wasn't really
yeah,
a choice. It came from a deeper place of, yeah, more of an animal instinctual thing of I just have to do this.
yeah.
Um, so tell me, so when you got back from your travels and you sort of returned to New York, how different was New York in your eyes from when you left? I mean, what, and how different were you to yourself when you were looking at and feeling into who you were from when you left?
Yeah, completely different. I mean, my first part of traveling, I was out of the country for 5.5 months. So it was like I didn't come back to the States at all. And then I came back for a little while, and then I started shorter trips using New York as my home base. But after that first 5.5 months, I quickly sank into almost like a low level depression after doing all that traveling because I was a completely different person, and nothing changed for anyone else. And I was only gone for 5.5 months, right? Like just a very short period of time in theory, but for me it was a very long trip, and I couldn't I couldn't relate to anyone. I didn't understand why people are obsessing over really trivial, unnecessary things, and it was very hard to connect. And um, I still felt like I started to feel an ache again, and I was like, okay, something is really not right. Like I already blew up my life, and I embarked on this started this journey of traveling was a dream, and it was all beautiful. Like I had an amazing time traveling, met incredible people, saw just beautiful places, different cultures around the world. Like very blessed. And I come back and I'm like, oh, this is hard. And I had a friend who had traveled around the world for about a year, and he said, like, he kind of warned me. He said, give yourself space when you come back and integrate. Like it can be hard. It's like almost coming down from like a high. And so that set me on to deeper self exploration. Um, uh, and I felt as far as New York itself, I think I felt like repulsed by it.
Right.
I didn't didn't want to be there. And I think I was angry. I was angry for the choices I made. And so until I completely healed within myself, it took me a few years to make peace actually with the city. And now I get lit up when I go there. I love it. I don't want to live there full time, but like I feel that love affair of, why I was originally drawn to it. And so it's great when I go back for like a couple of weeks, but it was years to heal that.
And I guess there's qualities to it, and having been there, and things that it gave you that you can still use in this new life, that need to be acknowledged. Because often when we've left something, just like you're saying, we reject all of it. But
Yeah.
actually, there's some key things usually that make us who we are, that really, for me, inspire gratitude once I've got beyond the kind of rejection and acknowledging. Um, I remember, so I'm from Manchester, I was born in Manchester, which is the north of England, and it's very different from London. And when I left Manchester to go to art college in London, I didn't go back for about 4 or 5 years or something like that.
Mhm.
And when I finally went back, because I'd moved on, I was doing London, and London was exciting, there was lots going on. But when I finally went back, um, I was so moved by it.
Mm.
We just went to a pub somewhere, and it was full of all these old men just drinking their beer. And it was in a place called Eccles, which is kind of on the edge of Manchester, or further out in the centre. And there was a softness to the people. There was a warmth and a kind of a bit like something like an old slipper or something that's so worn and it's been
Mm.
used so much, but it's soft and it's comfortable, and there was a tremendous sense of sort of soul and love. I felt so much love for the people and from the people, not in a kind of um, not in an obvious open way, but it was just kind of there.
Yeah.
And I realized, oh my God, it's so different from the culture in London. And it's a part of who you are. You come from a place where the heart is really strong in the people. And it's
Mhm.
the Industrial Revolution kind of started pretty much in Manchester.
Yeah.
spread out the whole world. So these people have had a hard time. You think about all the sort of generations of people working in factories, and all
Yeah.
the horrors of what happened in the Industrial Revolution to humans, to people, how
Yeah.
their communities were kind of split up, and then just the softness of all of that, and yet they're still kind of, they've still got their humanity. And I was so moved by that. I remember,
Mhm.
like sort of tears forming when I realized these are my people. This is where I'm from, and I'll always, and ever
Yeah.
since that kind of, because I had sort of pushed away from it and thought, oh, I don't want anything to do with that anymore. But now it's a central part of who I am. I carry that, that sense of pride, almost not pride, but knowing that the heart is at the center of everything I do, and
Yeah.
that's partly because of where I'm from, and almost, and the weather as well. Maybe it's a bit like San Francisco, because not in the same way, but I sense that there's a kind of a softness or a mistiness, because don't you get a lot of fog and stuff
Yes.
coming in off the Pacific?
Yes.
So there's something
Hmm.
about water, because it rains a lot in Manchester, and I feel like that softens everything. It just,
Yeah.
anyway, I went off there. I went.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And just that, and especially um, at a young age to have that appreciation,
Mm.
like to have that realization. Sometimes, it takes when you get more towards the end of your life to be able to
Sure.
acknowledge that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
London's in, I've been to London. That's also an intense city.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it really is. And amazing, just in just the same way you were saying about New York, incredible place as well. The energy
Yeah.
and the opportunity and the people. I went to London. It was the people that
Mhm.
made it for me. Because it draws the most incredible people from all over the
Yeah.
world, just like New York or any of
Yeah.
these big cities. They're magnets. They have a gravity. So
Yeah.
whatever it is you're into, you will find some incredible people who are also into that thing. And
Yeah.
I think for me, it was for the first time I felt like I'd found my people in a different sense. There's the sense of my people as from where I'm from in a more general way, but the kind
Right.
of particular person I am, I felt like I found my contemporaries, my people, when I went to London, and that
Mm-hmm.
was such an important thing. Um,
Yeah.
and I still today, actually, I have connections with those people, and I know that I'll know them for my whole life, because
Yeah.
they were there at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same for some of
Yeah.
my New York
Yeah.
people.
And even though you may move on and do different things, there's a real there's a there's a deep worth in maintaining those connections. Something that I had neglected over the years, but I've come back to now, realizing it's
Mm.
important, because you share something
Yeah.
really important
Yeah.
with people. So
Yeah.
so I want to know now about San Francisco, and or the next phase of heading westwards, or what was it that then sort of got you towards your new life, as it were?
Yeah. Um, so many chapters.
Sure, I bet. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I think so when I came back from the 5.5 months of traveling, and then I was feeling like some like sadness and still confusion. I like a light bulb. Well, I actually did self reflection first. I was like, do I need a therapist? Like, what kind? Like, I was like, I clearly need some support. And like two things became clear. One is that I had strayed from like my spiritual connection, and it started to open up a bit while I was traveling. But I was always someone who was I'm like I'm a very open channel for the divine, and one of the ways I do that is through writing. So the traveling helped me reconnect with that gift and that love, and it was a way of opening up and open up my own spirit. And um, but there was like still another layer of the connection that was missing. And what I would say is like prayer and just like more daily dialogue. And eventually I came into meditation, but that was like a piece of it. And the other piece was there's still like no one in my life living this massive dream that I felt in my heart. Like there's just this huge way of living in the world that was completely different from how majority of the world operates, but I knew it existed.
Tell us what that was. What was the dream? Describe it, because that's I'm interested in that.
Um,
How it seemed to you, or what was this way of life that you were looking to live?
I've just always wanted peace like, and love. Like like I don't understand what's going on in the world. Like I can't like I feel like this little child inside of me is just everyone play and be nice with each other. Like I don't I don't understand it. Like I don't understand what's going on and how we've gotten to this point that we can't just see we're all one. Like we're all family. Like we're all connected. Just be kind and love each other. And I know there's much bigger problems and you can't just wave a wand to go around loving each other and like there's we have to get to the root of things. I'm not bypassing that, but that's like the core of like my drive. And I think initially when I wanted to start working with women, I was very passionate about just ending violence, ending sexual violence for women and kids. I mean, all humans, but like that was a huge because it's so much violence there, um, and and just be of more service. I think it was the bigger dream of that, right? So like those were the desires, and it's like, well, how can we be of more of service and actually help uplift people and reach out the hand to those who need a little bit more support, if we're a little bit further along, let's say. And I just saw everyone like just going after the money, which I did that. I lived that life, but there was always still like this this pulse underneath of knowing something else, and I just watching everyone not being awake to that, um, and suffering, just so much suffering that is mostly self-inflicted. So I wanted something different, and also more connection to the earth, and also like the healing of the planet, and that like more consciousness ultimately. um,
Yeah, it's so interesting you say it that way, because in a way, I've had a vision quite similar to that, and it's so obvious to me that you say it's not. There are a lot of problems, but actually, this is probably the most effective way to start to solve the problems is to just take care of everyone, take care of everything, find that love again for just being alive, find the love, and it's really beyond your individual self. Like you're saying,
yeah,
it's this remembering that we are all completely woven together. Even even before you talk about on a sort of spiritual or a conscious level, just physically we are woven together. We're inseparable from the web of life,
yeah,
and
exactly.
it's amazing to me that because we all know it. This is the thing. Everybody knows that this is
Yeah,
fucked and it doesn't work and it's rapidly killing us and everybody else on
yeah,
Earth, all the things living here. And yet, and the answer is so simple. So, I mean, I feel like we're closer and closer because everybody does know it and they recognize it when they see it.
yeah,
Um, but what's interesting is because you did go on the Wall Street journey, what's really valuable from the outside is that you know intimately what the money chasing world is and you've lived it, so you are completely
yeah,
qualified to say, actually, no, there is a better way and there's this. Whereas a lot of people, myself included, who didn't go down that route, who've always been saying, no, no, that doesn't work, it's terrible. We have no weight behind us because we
right,
haven't lived it. We haven't
yeah,
worked it from the inside out.
yeah,
So that's a kind of superpower that you've got now, is that you actually were there and you
yeah,
know it intimately. And actually, like anything, I've discovered as time has passed in my life that all the negative things that I've ever had to go through always gave me something. They always gave me a gift or
Yeah.
a kind of insight or a skill or, and it's good to acknowledge that. Just like, we have to integrate the shadow parts of ourselves.
Yes.
Those bad experiences are often maybe the best teachers, or so, that
Yeah.
I feel like that, whoever you are, wherever you're at, whatever's going on, if things are really terrible, there is a way to look at it and think, well, what is this teaching me? What is it giving me? And there's
Yeah.
always something there, always.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a clear signal to change and get out and do something different,
Yeah.
which is, obviously a great thing at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Thank you for that reflection and the way that you said that, in the context of the weight behind, in the global, on a more global scale. I've seen that as far as like working with clients, that I could relate in a way that you couldn't unless you're in that environment.
Mm.
You know, you never fully know until you live it. You can have an idea of it. A lot of the movies you see about Wall Street are pretty accurate. Um, so like, but to be in it day in and day out, yeah. But from the sense of the capitalist perspective, that's a good reflection that, yeah, I do have some weight and with
No,
that and experience.
do you know the film The Big Short with
Yeah.
Christian Bale? That is one of my favorite films, and I still don't fully understand why, because obviously the subject matter. I mean, it's terrible when you realize exactly what's going, and it's still going on now, which is
Yes.
horrendous. But there's something about the way it's written, the performances are amazing, but it is an incredible film.
Yeah.
I love it. I've watched it. I don't watch many films more than once, but that one I have.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yes, there's something that's captivating about it, and curious, like trying to make sense of how people can operate that way. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because even though obviously you've got the kind of crusading character, I forget his name, but the guy who's kind of trying to fix the world, um, and but then you've got the Christian Bale character who is the kind of genius of numbers and sees what's going to happen before anybody else. But he's so kind of detached in a way emotionally from what's
Right.
really going on, you know. But he's still somehow he's kind of, to me, he's compelling and attractive. Maybe because he's just authentic, because he's
Yeah.
really just being himself. And I think
Yeah.
there's something about that. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and he's making people lots of money, but he's not driven by greed, or you could imagine he doesn't care about money, but he's very good at what he does, and he's just being himself, which
Right.
yeah, it's fascinating. I love that
Yeah.
film. It's fascinating.
It's a
Yeah.
good movie. It is.
So talk a bit. I I guess it'd be good to sort of get into a bit what it is that you're doing now, and what is your work, and I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Now I'm in a transition phase with some of like the bigger focus of my work, and so I struggle with titles because that's not really what it's about anyway. But essentially, I made a transition to a women's empowerment coach, and then I realized that so much of what I'm doing is really rooted in spirituality, and for me, it's connecting to your heart. So even if you don't have a spiritual practice per se, or don't necessarily resonate with the word divine or God, goddess, whatever you use, like we all have a heart. We all can understand that. And so ultimately it's like, how can we come back to ourselves, come back to our intuition, come back to our own inner wisdom, and move from that space, like make all of our decisions from there. And then like the bigger picture of what I'm in my work that I'm doing and want to help with women is the consciousness, like start being aware of everything that you're doing. Because a lot of times people come to me and they'll want something, and they'll want a conscious partnership, like romantic partnership, but they don't actually love themselves and they don't have that connection with themselves first. And you can't have that without the self-love. But then once you go deeper into the self-love, it's kind of hard to ignore that we're connected to Mama Earth and the trees and the animals and all those things. So then how do you do better? Like, it's like not everything has to be shifted overnight, but just start to make those steps. And then that's how you draw in the partnerships that you want and the careers that you want and all, your other dreams and desires. It's very
So,
layered, but I hope that makes sense.
yeah, so it's really about just uncovering what you already are, yeah,
Hmm.
and finding those deeper and higher maybe parts of who you are, and yeah, what talk about what divine means to you. How do you define that for yourself, and what does spiritual mean to you? That might be quite useful to hear.
Mm. Um, Spiritual to me is like the pulsating of all life. It's like everything. I often say like everything's a prayer. Like this breath is a prayer. This moment is a prayer. A lot of people have so much stigma around the word prayer because of religious upbringing, but we can remove it from like organized religion. It's not about that. It's that I feel like it's the dance with life. And that's what I feel like spirituality is. It's that thread, that pulsing of connection. And I sort of don't have much of a distinction between spiritual and divine. To me, it's like kind of the same thing. It's just whatever word I use in the moment. It's like this divine energy, this like magic, this wonder. But which is also part of the thread of life. So they're kind of synonymous for me.
Or is perhaps, because it sounds like the spiritual is the relationship with the divine, or that's kind of how I'm hearing it when you're talking. The divine is the sort of state of things. It's what is. It's what's there. It's
Yeah.
the unifying principle throughout everything. And
Yeah, I think that resonates. To,
yeah, and kind of spirituality is how we relate, and it could be a practice. And you're saying prayer, which is a great prayer's like a relationship. It's because to me prayer now I'm starting to understand, or one way of looking at it is for people who do have a kind of allergy to God because of the baggage of the
mhm.
past, is maybe that if you think about this higher self, which is just an aspect of you that isn't your personality, isn't your ego, isn't this kind of person called Tim that you identify with, but is maybe more like the witness that's kind of watching
Yeah.
you live your life. Or maybe it's even this thing that's much bigger than yourself, of which everything is a part, that you nonetheless have a direct connection with and can, talk to or ask questions of or ask for help from,
Yes.
which is what a prayer is really. I suppose it's an intentional statement or question or something like that that's talking to something greater than yourself,
Yes.
whatever that may be. Um, anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess I'm trying to define it for myself or how I
Yeah.
understand it, because we often use words that we know what we mean, but other people may have a completely different version of,
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And there is just so much weight around the word prayer. And I understand I was raised Catholic. I don't associate with organized religion anymore. And I didn't from a very young age. I sort of started rebelling against a lot of the doctrines with it. And it's not to say that it doesn't serve a purpose. And I'm not saying it's all bad if that's your thing, but it's sort of like what we're talking about, like making peace in front with me with New York and then you with London and pulling the pieces forward with us that are of value. It's like that to me is something that it was valuable that I learned, like prayer. But I don't recite the prayers that I learned in church. I have my own language now. But the essence, the energy of it as a form of communication, I think is powerful
that,
and
that's a,
necessary.
yeah, that's a really important point about. So we do have this troubled relationship with organized religion, or a lot of people do, who are kind of more atheist or whatever, or humanist or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But in that same way that we were talking about before, when you reject the thing that you've just come out of completely, you're missing a lot of what's valuable in it. And of
Yeah.
course, all of the world's organized religions have massive amounts of wisdom
Yes.
and good sense and, love in their origins and at the heart of them. And yeah, it's been corrupted inevitably by humans
Yes.
and their schemes and their,
Yeah.
their ideas and hierarchies and systems that they put on, that they layer on top of these wisdoms or these original visions that were given to people. But
Yeah.
so much, and if you can, this is something I've found, if you can go back to that with a very neutral, from a neutral place, you can
Hmm.
really see all the good stuff, and you can incorporate things from Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism,
Hmm.
whatever it is, whichever tradition, and you can weave them together and kind of create your own religion, because really we're all a church. Each individual person is their own church and has their own particular flavor. um,
Yes.
and in that same way that we're all connected, we also have this individuated part, and it's this dance between the two, the separateness and the complete togetherness. That in a way, that's what makes life rich and beautiful, is that sort of dance between those two elements, and kind of that journey it takes us on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think our bodies are temples, so we're like walking temples,
Yeah, yeah. I
and
feel that. That's a great. This is something people often hear, that your body is your temple, but it really, if you take that on board, uh,
yeah,
and it can really inspire you to look after it, to feed it, to build a better temple. To create something beautiful for you to kind of go into or be in and have your relationship with the divine from within
yeah,
that vehicle, that temple. Yeah.
yeah, and to have find that peace, that inner peace as well. I mean, something that I did a lot when I was traveling, and that I still like to do at times, is to go into an empty church or empty temple, because it gives. I do think there is a foundation that's rooted in the desire for love and peace and unity, but yes, the corruption. So there's like just something that about the essence of a sanctuary, and I feel like if we honor our own spirits and our bodies, like this is our sanctuary that we have with us all the time.
Yeah, and you carry it with you wherever you go, so there's always a place to be in, to
Mm-hmm.
sort of have that. That's a great way of looking at it. That because it's funny, I do the same thing. We're blessed with lots of tiny little churches in all the villages in Norfolk, because once upon a time it was quite wealthy. Um, the sheep, the wool, and the sheep
Mm-hmm.
that kind of grazed here made lots of money for the landowners, and they all built churches in their villages. So there's a wealth of really beautiful ancient churches,
Oh,
and
that's incredible.
in exactly that same way you're saying, just to go in there and the peace and the quiet, and they've been built for that. This
Yes.
is the other thing, and thousands of people have sat there with those kind of intentions, in that spirit, the energy in those places, over years and years of worship has kind of soaked into the building, and that's
Yeah.
a palpable thing. And if you do need to go and meditate or have some quiet, or even just think about something that's going on in your life, a church is a great place to do that, and you don't need to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Thankfully, most churches are open to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, long may that
Yeah.
last.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I love this idea of, if you've got your own temple, which is your body, wherever you are in the world, you are in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an incredibly powerful, grounding boundary that you can carry with you. You talk about peace, which keeps coming up, and I like that. This sort of
Yeah.
sense of wanting to find peace, which when you say peace, I get this vision or remembrance of my earliest experience of what I would call bliss, but maybe, could just be called pure being, where everything just dropped away. There wasn't really a me anymore. I was just kind of there, aware of it all. And there's two memories. One is I'm really probably the earliest one. It's the first house I lived in, and I'm lying on the carpet in my bedroom. And this must be before the age of 5, because we moved, I think, around 5 or 4 or 5. So I'm just lay on the carpet. The sun, it's the afternoon sun in the west, and it's shining through the window, and the room is completely still. And the carpet is really old and worn away, and the texture of the sort of weave of the carpet, it's a kind of manila color, and there's a sort of rusty, mustardy colored carpet, but it's quite threadbare. And there's just a sense of feeling that texture, lying on the floor, and I'm completely at peace. And I'm warm, and I feel like, like a cat, when you see a cat just like relaxing completely in the sun, or like utterly relaxed. That's how I'm feeling. And there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, there's no thoughts, there's nothing to be, and it's so powerfully tranquil. So every time you say peace, I get a little
A
remembrance.
little bit.
So I wonder, that your is that a part of what you're trying to bring to people, is just a remembrance of who they are, and that reconnection with the divine, which is this greater thing, which can give them that just sense of peace, of already being there. You're good enough. You don't need to do anything. You have everything you need right now.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it's something I hope to impart. I mean, it's because it's a practice. I mean, I teach it and I live it, but I'm still human. It's like
Sure.
it's not perfect with it, but it does take a devotion and a dedication, and a lot of it is shifting our internal thoughts. And like the first, she was more like I guess a spiritual mentor that or like coach that I worked with, and she asked me if I loved myself. And I was like, yeah. And then I started talking about things and I had a lot of confidence. And then she like kept digging with me and she's like, how do you talk to yourself? And I was like, whoa. And I started to observe my thoughts and I was like, I'm being self-abusive. Like I would never talk to a friend like this. Didn't know. It was like a loop pattern that I was on. But now there's like, it's not perfect, but it's so much more gentle. Or if it starts to revert, I know what to do in the moment to shift it. And I think that's so much of what is causing the dissonance within ourselves and keeping us away from that peace. And there is, the world is extremely troubled. If you're an empath, you're a sensitive being, it's hard to move in the world like this. So we need to find some ways to ground our energy and to find that within ourselves so that we can keep showing up for whatever we're being called to show up to do and the lives that our hearts are whispering to us to create.
Well, that brings me to the thing that I learned in the time here since I left London, which was the land. The land is the place that reminds you of that. It's the easiest way I have of plugging into something greater than myself, is just being in the land and loving the land. This is something I've learned, is that if you fall in love with the land where you live, it loves you back so much and is so nurturing and takes care of. And if you think it takes care of all the things we need, actually, if we were living more harmoniously with it, it gives us, it gives us everything we've got now. It all came from the land. It all came from the land, including ourselves. It's like that's the greater temple, as it were, that holds all the individual ones. But there's this, and it's there all the time, just waiting. to remember. Uh,
Yeah.
Wherever you are, even if you live in a city, you somewhere there's a bit of grass or a tree, or you can sit down and plug in.
Yes.
Electrically you can plug in, take your
Yes.
shoes off, take your socks off, put your skin on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of energetic grounding is
Yes.
real. We are
Yes.
electrical beings.
Yes.
That's why you can have a scan, in the hospital, is because we're very subtly electrical. So,
Yes.
and the ground is the ground. So, and we're walking around in plastic shoes all day, and,
Yes.
plug in, recharge. It's like, when I lie on the floor, on the ground outside, I feel like I'm a phone being plugged into the charger, and it sort of
Yes.
resets everything as well. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
clears all the noise, and yeah, that practice, and that availability of that, and that relationship, that, to me, the cultural remembrance of that relationship is probably one of the most important things we need right now,
Yes.
before it's too late, because in a way that's what led to a lot of the trouble, is that we lost our connection with the land. We
Yes.
were so far up in our heads that we forgot we had bodies and hearts, and we forgot that we were an inseparable part of the land.
Yes.
Um, so it's really powerful, and it's great for me to see more and more people who are working in healing or personal development or creativity are doing things with the land, outside in nature. It's really heartening, because I can see that that's a general feeling that's spreading, is the sort of remembrance, or this renaissance of land connection. So
Yeah.
so is that how does that, because you mentioned it a little bit before, how does that sort of weave into the work that you do, the actual practical things that you do with women?
The land
Hmm.
specific. Um,
If it
I
does, I mean, I'm
yeah.
assuming that, but
Yeah. I I I always encourage, as part of like practices, is to go out in nature, like go out for walks. And as you said, even if you're in a city, even if in your urban area, there's always a tree around somewhere. There's at least a flower planter, and majority of city, like I don't know any city that doesn't have some small park. So but even if you for whatever reason can't get to the park, like go to the tree, go to the flower planter. And to what
well,
you're
look
saying,
up. Everywhere has
yes.
sky, yeah.
Yes,
Everywhere has
exactly.
birds flying around. Even the cities, the biggest
Yes.
cities of the world. There's always
Yes.
sky. There's always air, just about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I don't know if I mean, I encourage that, and I talk about it as if in my writing or post the inspiration. I don't know if I would say it's something that I specifically like. I'm not going with women and taking them out to
Okay.
nature at this point. Something I'd like to down the line, but it is something where I'm constantly talking about the wonder. That's sort of also another way that I would, I guess, talk about the divine. It's like, look up. I do say that a lot. And it's the only book I still have from a kid. I have it in my room right now in my office space, and it's called Look Up. And you go through it, and it's this little kid's book, and it's all about like the wonder and the things that you see in the sky. And like, even just taking a moment at night, go step outside and look up. Even in a city, you usually can maybe see like one star, but if not, you just get like the air and the expansiveness from looking up. And it does ground you. It's a different form of grounding than laying in the ground, but there's a way to connect. And I talk a lot about hugging trees and how we get so much grounding and connection. And if you're really open, they will talk to you, like in wisdom of that. And even if you have flowers in your house, it's like, and plants, talk to them. I
Mm.
tell my flowers and plants that I love them all the time. Like it's just, you don't have to necessarily touch them all the time, but it's having that constant dialogue and communication. So I think I talk about it and I pepper it in my teachings, rather than like, this is what you need to do type of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting, because in a way that's a form of a practice of self-love as well. If if you sort of describe it as that, because yeah, obviously culturally lots of people would just get freaked out if you say speak, tell the plants you love them, they think you're
Yes.
mad. but in a way it just acknowledges the connectedness of everything, and even as a trick maybe you could say, but of course they are living things, so why shouldn't you love them? Just they're beautiful things.
Right.
When I see a flower growing or a tree, it's a beautiful thing. Why wouldn't I love it? There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with that. But you
exactly.
can also you could almost kind of trick yourself, or not trick, but make it more acceptable by saying, well, it's an exercise in loving, which ultimately is helping you love yourself, which is the
Yes.
basis of being able to love anything anyway. So
Yes.
I kind of like it like that. But
That's
and
powerful.
I've got relationships with trees. I mean, I really, there are individual trees that I've known since they were this big that are now fully grown, because I've been here 17 years, I think it is.
Mm.
And there's a one in particular, there's a birch tree just not far from the house, which when I first moved here, it was all quite overgrown, and I was clearing some of the land around to let more light in and to make it safe so that some of the bigger trees wouldn't fall on the building in a
Yeah.
storm. And I remember seeing this tiny little birch tree and thinking, oh, I'll clear some space around that so it can grow. And over the years, it's just become a bigger and bigger tree
Bigger
until
tree.
now it's this tall, slender, graceful tree on its own with grass around. And for the first year, not this year, but the year before, a whole load of fly agaric mushrooms, the red and white, the sort of the red and white speckle, the very kind of typical fairy
Yep.
mushroom, they
Yes.
all sprouted around it, and it was like it came of age. I felt like now this is a full tree because
Yeah.
it's got its community, and
That's
and
awesome.
the tremendous sort of sense of friendship, I suppose, I have with this tree and many others that I've seen grow or that were old already when I got here.
Yeah.
It's like part of community, and all the things you might get from human community. This is just an enhancement of that,
Hmm.
and I feel like that all plants and animals are potentially that if you open yourself up to it, and
Yes.
you will feel all of the richness and the love and the beauty that you feel from a good community, from having good friendships. And they're available, all the time. So even in the city, there is that tree that grows on your street.
Hmm.
You know, introduce yourself,
Yeah.
start a friendship up. Tell it your troubles. That
Yeah.
go and whisper your deepest fears to it, and you may be surprised what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's very true. And just and what a testament to you for the like how much you fostered that relationship with the birch tree and the love that you did in tending to the land and like also that's so powerful to give something space, right? Like we're all told to like contract and stay small, right? And it's like no, you gave it this breathing room to expand. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it all kind of just it was unlooked for and unexpected, and I kind of fell into it. So
Yeah.
which is probably the best way with anything, isn't it?
Yes.
That nobody told me. I didn't read anything. It just kind of happened. The
Hmm.
land itself showed me things
Yeah.
because I guess I was willing to listen or to give it that attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very what is it? It's this thing of giving it space. It's more like it's a relationship. This is what I've learned. It's this, there is agency in humans. They can do things, and this is what they're good at. But if they're doing it in a conversational way, in a listening way with what they're doing it with. So if you move somewhere and you've got all these ideas about what you want to do in the garden, stop, give it a year and just see what the place is doing already, and
Right.
start to have a dialogue with it. So you sort of notice how certain things do things, start listening to it, and it will show you maybe what you could then do. And you can use that incredible human agency to do things. And in this sort of symbiotic dance, you can create something more beautiful than that would have done on its own, and more beautiful than you would have done entirely with your own plan. You know,
Yes.
it's a more optimum beauty, if you like. And I really feel like that's kind of who we are. We're stewards in a way of the planet, and our ideal or most appropriate role is taking care of everything and doing things and shaping the environment, but very much in a sensitive dance with it, and really listening and receiving as much from it as we're putting in.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's all how to kind of, these are sort of ideas that I'd like to explore more because they've been my experience, and now I'm sort of at a point where I'm thinking, well, it'd be interesting to try and communicate that in a clearer way, and things like conversations like this are where I can sort of start to explore that.
Yeah.
But of course, this is not new. This is like ancient knowledge that's been
Yes.
forgotten, that bits of are being remembered, and you remember in the living. By
Yes.
living something, that's when it gets revealed.
Hmm.
Often maybe that is what wisdom is it has to be earned through living.
Yeah.
You can read about a million things that other people have done, but I think until you actually live something like your experience in Wall Street and subsequent experiences on your travels, you can't really know something till you know it, till you've been
Right.
there in it.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
So why women though? That I'm just remembering that struck me as what drew you to working with women in particular? What was the calling there?
Because I don't know if I didn't have the language then, but how I would say it now. I think the ultimate drive was just seeing the imbalance in the world. I'm not of the energy of like um, woman rising in power over men. I'm very much of like sacred union. Like we need to come into balance and to be equals with each other. We need each other, and women need men, men need women. Like it's all of that. But I couldn't wrap my head around also there's just like this lopsidedness and how this far along in history there's still so much oppression for women, and looking back at all my ancestors and just in general the history and how much women have fought, and men, good men who have fought for the rights of women, the imbalance just mind-boggling to me. And even just in Wall Street also seeing how hard it was for a woman to climb the ladder and how much she had to cut off from her innate truth and her innate femininity to shape into a masculine world, but not even a healthy masculine. Like it's toxic. Like, and we all have masculine and feminine energy, no matter what gender or like however you identify, right? We all have that energy, but there's such an imbalance in the world that everything is hyper masculine and it's not integrated in a healthy way. So there's all this. That's why people, talk about the toxic patriarchy, and
Yeah, so it's more the feminine than we. I mean, you're working with women, but actually it's the underlying feminine that you're talking about, which I get is we have there's a cultural imbalance of, I mean, even beyond masculine and feminine, it's sort of left and right brain, which you can loosely say is masculine, feminine. It's that kind of pointed, direct, small, focused energy rather than the field, rather than and that's why also that culturally we do these things which we just look at the one thing and try and do that, but we ignore the entire context, which is
yes,
insane. You
yes,
look at the pandemic and the way we've kind of approached that. we're not seeing it as a big whole thing that's going on. We're just looking at one thing which we're now going to fix, which of course you can't, because it's inseparable from the whole.
Yes.
And this lack of context of field thinking or feeling, which is a more feminine principle, or the total imbalance that you're pointing to, that a lot of our trouble is that, and it is an imbalance, because there isn't one is bad, one is good, of course. It's
No.
when they're out of balance, things don't work. And
Yes.
so this kind of the feminine in everything needs kind of healing and space, and I guess inevitably the place as a woman to start with that for you is with women who are also,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I sense intuitively, like down the line, I may do some work with men. It's not like a it's just this is the community, right? Like some people work with children, some people work with teenagers, some people like, work with whatever the thing is, the community. But this is what I was drawn to and led to for at least where I am right now. And it feels important for women to reclaim their power, like because there's so much disempowerment for all beings, but it seems to be heightened with women. And we need them to start to rise, to infuse more of the feminine energy so that everyone can, or more like if you, yes, if you want to take away the labels, if you will, of feminine and energy, but more creating more flow and more of a spiral way of moving in the world and less linear.
Mm.
And I just think it's more innate and natural to people who identify as women or than men necessarily. And that being said, I have a partner who is he's a man and he's very masculine, but he's also very in touch with his feminine side. And he's also good at the spiral. So it's like, it's not one or the other, but it's just this community. I feel like women needs a little more support in that, in the remembering. I don't know if
So
that answers.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you're working. Do you tend to work with sort of one-on-one with women, or do you do groups of women as well? How does it show up in terms of what you do?
Yeah, I do both. Um, I started out initially teaching dance, so then that's where my group work started. And then as I started to grow and build my own business, a coaching business, it was one-on-one work. And then sometimes when we were able to safely in person hosting gatherings for women. And now I just started to do that virtually. So I'm doing like a monthly goddess gathering. And the intention is to create sacred and safe space with a theme. So, like coming into some sort of divine feminine wisdom, some sort of teaching and tool and practice that you can then incorporate into your life. And ultimately, the through line through everything that I'm doing is like, I want you to start to hear your heart more. I want you to start hearing your intuition more. So I do a lot of like guided meditation and prayer to help each person individually get into that space because it's there's a danger if you like some people, the shadow side of coaching is like they have the answer and it's their way and they're the only one who can give you this power, and it's like no, you need to run in the other direction if someone's telling you like that.
Go to the
Anything
trap.
that yeah, yeah, and any reason that a client is drawn to me for, they have that ability, I just want to help unlock it. Like I would never want someone to work with me for like ever, right? Like I want you to like just remember. I mean, it's like we all need support. We can all do things on our own, but we also need support. And sometimes it's like when you're just starting to learn how to walk, you're a little wobbly, you need someone to guide you, and then you could go off on your own. Like that's what I want. And so yeah. So
Yeah.
this month the theme is sacred boundaries, and then I did one in January for around setting your intentions for the new year and just beginning to vision. And it's like, okay, what is your voice in your inner voice telling you? What's a word that you're getting for the year? And it's amazing by just taking the time and space and being curious and open what can come up in such a short period of time.
Mm. Giving yourself permission and and just sort of trying very simple techniques which just disrupt or interrupt those habits, those kind of things you're not even aware that you're doing all the time that maybe aren't serving you. Or, yeah,
Yeah.
sounds great. Well, I'm conscious we're getting close to your time,
I
so
know. I could talk to you for hours.
I feel like we've had quite. I mean, obviously there's more to say, but
Yeah.
I think that was quite a nice sort of introduction, anyway.
Yeah.
Great journey, and
Thank you.
thanks for sharing your story, um, something of your travels.
Yeah. Thank you for listening and also for some of your beautiful reflection and sharing a little bit about your own journey. And also just everything that you're doing here to highlight the importance of just the connection and listening to each other and also to the land. It's such a beautiful and needed message.
Yeah, it's
And I
all.
encourage and invite everyone to just go hug a tree, try it out.
Yeah, yeah. Just just sit. Even if you don't want to hug it, just sit down on the floor at the base and lean against
You
it,
can sit, yeah.
and just feel whatever, feel. Yeah, no intention, no expectation. Just see what it's like. Yeah,
Just take a breath. Let yourself just take
yeah.
a breath while
Just
you're
breathe it in.
leaning. Yeah.
Ah, yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.